All right guys, well I just got out here to the field in the Dammer Diker. So let me show you what this is. So you can see that I'm in a field, and sorry if it's a little windy out here, but I'm in a field. This has all been planted in potatoes right here. So all the rows are there, but the problem with the rows is the planters don't make perfect rows. So you can see there's little like ridges here in the middle. The hills are not super filled in around the edges. So that's why we use the Dammer Diker. So the Dammer Diker goes in after the potatoes are planted. Some people call it a cultivator, some people call it a Dammer Diker, because they do make cultivators that have the shank and stuff, but don't have the Dammer Diker on the back. So the Dammer Dikers, I mean, is really just a paddle wheel on the back. But yeah, so these shanks, they'll go in between the rows, and then they have these fins on the bottom. Now that goes underneath where the potatoes are planted, and it works up and loosens the dirt underneath. So you get a good batch of potatoes. The potatoes can grow without much restriction underneath the ground. And then you have these wings. You can kind of see it, it's kind of covered in dirt, but you have this wing that helps when the shank comes through. It lifts a bunch of dirt up, and then it hits those wings and it throws it out. So if the row's right here, the wings throw the dirt on top of the row, and then it helps build that row up. And then we have this drag bar, because we don't want to build it up too much, because we don't want to change the seed depth. So there's a seed, a potato seed, at 6 inches is where we have it set. So if it just threw it up and I didn't drag any off, it could change it to about an 8-inch depth. So we have this drag bar. So the drag bar, it just throws it up, builds it up, it hits the drag bar, that pushes all the material that is above 6 inches and pushes it off to each side, and helping to add more dirt to each side of that row. Next we have the paddle wheel. So these paddle wheels, they just go into the ground, and they make a little divot right where the paddle sits. Where each one of these will hit will be a divot, and then on each side, as it kind of goes in like this. So on each side it makes a little, like a bowl, and I'll show you one of them over here. So it makes that little bowl. What that's for is for when you're watering. It's a spot for the water to sit. So you can kind of see right here. Let's go out of here just a little bit more. So you can kind of see the rows are here, and then there's like a dam right there with a hole on each side. So each of those is where a paddle hit. So it makes a big hole for the water to sit in when you're watering it. And especially for hills, it's like we have a little hill right here, and on the other side there's a bigger hill. But for hills, it's good because then your water doesn't just run down the hill. Because I mean, if you think about it, if we didn't do it, and you have this tire track right here where the planter went, the water's going to hit that and just run. So by having the dikes, it hits and stops, and then it just waters right there where that potato plant is. So that's why we go through with the cultivator, Dammer Diker, whatever you want to call it, and it just helps build the rows up. You can kind of see, if I get out of the, it's kind of hard to see, there is a row right here. Maybe if I get down lower. So it's kind of a short, narrow row, and then if you look at these rows, they're a lot wider and flat on top. They're just bigger. So the Dammer Diker just builds them up, makes the rows bigger and nicer. So let's go run this thing. I'll show you how it works. So now we're in the tractor here. I have to skip. I skip rows just because it makes it easier for turning around at the end. I don't have to turn so sharp. But the next spot I have to go down is right here. So one thing that's nice, and I know that GPS has been around for a long time, but what's nice is I can just kind of get this thing online, and then I look here at my GPS, I'm like, okay, it found the line. I can just activate the GPS, and if you watch that front tire, it'll just get me on the line. So I kind of overshot it a little bit. So if I back up, you'll see the tires move, and it just kind of gets me online, because I want to make sure that before I put this thing in the ground that I am in line with the row, because it will move the rows. Those big fins on the back, they'll move the row. So we got to make sure that we are on line before I put it down. So now I can drop it down and we can take off here, and you can see this thing go. So you can see all the paddles turning. We zoom in here. You can see there's a shank right there. You can kind of see the dirt flowing up. If you look at these edges, you can see the dirt hitting that drag bar and kind of falling, getting pushed back down. And I mean, it is kind of hard to see down there how everything's working, but if we zoom in on this center one, you can see that it is throwing that dirt out of the way. So it is working. And then if we zoom in on this one right here, you can see there's dirt flowing up onto the top of the row and then hitting that drag bar, getting pushed back down. And then you can see the paddle wheel right there doing its job, going in, and it's on a hydraulic ram right here, and it kind of moves up and down as the paddle hits, because there's a hard spot at the very bottom. So as the paddle hits that hard spot, it will kind of move up and down. You can kind of, if you look at the shaft right there, the shaft is moving, so it's kind of jumping around. But you can see that it's making those good dams and dikes. And now the rows are nice and flat on top. Looks like we're getting into a spot where the planter kind of went back and forth a little bit. So the rows are going to get a little bit wavy here. But it does kind of smooth everything out. Makes good dams and dikes. That'll be really good for when we're watering. Now I've just gotten started. This is, I've probably done almost 200 acres. We have 1,200 acres that I have to do. So I have 1,000 more acres to do. I can only do about between 50 and 100 acres a day, depending on soil conditions and how fast I can go. Right now I'm only going 5 miles an hour, which I haven't set at 5 miles an hour. It might go 6, but when I set it to 6, the hills don't look nice like that. It kind of makes them more peaked. It just throws the dirt around us more, and it doesn't look quite as good, which I know if it doesn't look as good, that means it's not as good, because if you have a peaked row, you're not going to have as much dirt for the potatoes to grow in. Because one problem you can have is if you get lots of potatoes, like last year we had a ton of potatoes in the field, and they'll actually start to poke through the dirt. So if you don't have enough dirt on each side of the row and on top, then the potatoes will start to grow and poke through, and when they poke through and see the sun, that's when you get green ends on your potatoes, and nobody likes that. You don't want to eat the green ends on the potatoes. Because I do make these videos for me as well as you, I need to remember I have my 3-point hitch set on 15. Because every year, I mean, this year I got it and I was like, oh crap, I don't remember what this thing was set at. So I had to play around with it. But if you lift it up too high, the wings and the fins back there that kind of build up the row, they won't build up the row. It'll go above where it needs to go, and you'll just miss the whole row. So I want to make sure that every year I get that set at the right depth, because then it builds and makes those nice rows. So that's pretty much the only setting I have to remember. And also there's a hydraulic, there's some gauges right there. I have to make sure that my switch here is set to constant, and I turn it down pretty low. I think I only have it on like a 3. It's this one. So it's set pretty low. But we'll get back online here on the next pass. See, when I see my little tractor's about close to the line, I can hit that, and it will steer me right on the course. It's kind of nice having GPS. It is a little trippy when your tires turn by themselves, but man, it's handy. I know there's some people who are like, oh, I don't need GPS in my tractors. Yeah, I get it. But if you don't have GPS, you'll never get those straight rows. They'll always be wavy a little bit. You have guess rows. So in order to have these perfectly straight rows all the way down, you need GPS. Also, if you are doing harvest or something, you definitely want GPS. Yeah, you can steer. I mean, we always used to. But by having GPS, you can actually watch your implement and not have to worry about steering. So I can sit here and I can watch and make sure that nothing is going to break or there's nothing wrong with my machine versus steering the whole time. We have the pivot here that is running over here. Now I had to come and work up this piece because now I have to move the pivot over here so that I can work up this, because obviously I can't go where the pivot is. So I'm going to go down here to the panel. Hopefully there's power. There should be. And we'll get this pivot moved over here so I can keep working this field. So the reason I call it a Dammer Diker is because there's actually a brand of these that is called Dammer Diker. Like, that's the brand. So this is actually a Spudnik cultivator, because you can't call it a Dammer Diker. It's already registered as it's trademarked. So that's why most people call them cultivators, because there's one brand that is called Dammer Diker, and that's the one we used to have. We had that one, it worked good, but yeah, I was driving it down the highway. This was, I think, 2 years ago, and I got rear-ended by a car. Now, you see these paddles on the back. I would not want to drive into that with a car. I got hit by a car. He was going about 40 miles an hour. Amazingly, he survived. He wasn't even wearing a seatbelt. It was crazy. He was wedged clear up underneath this thing. And it wasn't this one, it was our old one. But he was wedged up underneath. It bent the frame of the machine because he was going so fast. And it just destroyed it. It totaled it. So insurance gave us some insurance money. And the reason we got this one instead of the Dammer Diker brand one is this one was like $7,000 or $8,000 less. But the frame is beefier on this one. So that's why we decided to get this one. But I'll put some pictures here of that wreck. Well, I mean, it's unhooked. We'll just have to get the loader to get that off. So yeah, I'm glad everybody is okay from that. I still have a little bit of anxiety driving tractors and just big pieces of equipment down the road. It makes me a little nervous because there's been a lot more people moving here recently, and there's a lot more traffic than there used to be. So we have to be pretty careful. But I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm going to keep going. I have a lot of acreage to do. I'm going to take some drone shots, so I hope you enjoy those. And I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.